Lot and wanting to intervene. So he went with his allies. So I was thinking that he already had allies. So what would it take for someone to be living in a land, settling there, and you've already made the right connections to have allies? But then they now described his own readiness for that battle where he was going to go and fight on behalf of Lot, that he had 318 trained men who had been born into his household. And honestly, when I read that, it felt like I'd read it for the first time. And I was like, why in the world would Abraham have trained men born into his household? It could only be that he was expecting that battle will come, or he was just preparing just in case. But for you to have trained men, if you've watched many action movies, just think about it. 318 born into his household and trained for war. So he went with those people and they went after the kings that are taking Lot and the land where he lived and everything. The Bible says that Abraham recovered all. Think about it. So if you've ever seen street fights before, and you know how it is, how gangs come together and then they go and then they win and then they take over. That's exactly what happened. So it just basically shaped who Abraham was for me. And so seeing that part, I started realizing that, man, this guy had audacity. He had confidence in who God was, the fact that God had called him, God had promised him. He had confidence in the fact that things would always work favorably for him. And so when he had the encounter with Melchizedek, even in chapter 14, the Bible said Melchizedek gave him bread and wine. And in my mind, I was like, of course, this is communion. This represents communion, right? Then Abraham gave him a tenth. So when the kings of the land that, he had won the battle for wanted to reward him, he told them, no, don't give me anything. He said, I don't want you to come and say in the future that you enriched Abraham. God, he was so sure of the promise that God had given him that he didn't want people to partake in it at all. And so starting from the point where he told Lot to take his pick of the land, to where he had the strength, the manpower, the workforce, right? To go into battle, to retrieve back Lot. It was like, not on my watch will anything happen to my nephew. And to the point where he could resist collecting an enrichment opportunity from men. It just tells you the character of the Abraham that many of us did not realize when we used to study the word in previous years. And you might be at that point where you know that God has given you a promise and you're struggling with the idea that that promise doesn't seem to have manifested yet. We might need to start to lean into the character of Abraham, to be audacious in allowing competition not to weigh us down, in going to war on the things that God has called us to go to war on, and in trusting that even when we don't take the offers or opportunities or open doors that people are giving us, because God doesn't want us to take those ones, right? God still has us covered, and he will fulfill the promise to us.